The idea is to provide an high-performance computing solution to the problem of delivering routes to the car navigating system in a smart city area. And they come out with a solution which is, let's say, pretty interesting from an application point of view, because it uses what is called approximate computing, which, let's say, poses also some challenge in how to model this type of approximate computing from a standard simple queuing network perspective. So the idea is that we have some clients that ask from a route in going from one point to another point of the city, and there is this single high-performance computing solution that try to propose to the people routes in a coordinated way, so that people aren't all being routed along the shortest path, but they try to share different paths along the city to respect policies and create a global pattern in the city. Well, basically, this application works in 3 different levels. So, first, the user selects where he is starting and where he wants to go, and then what the first stage of the algorithm does is try to compute several alternatives routes of different lengths passing from different parts of the city, so to explore a lot of different areas. Then, from each of these different routes, starting from some data about the traffic and the condition of the city, what the system does is computing the completion distribution. So, which is the probability distribution that one car starting from point A going to point B along this route will take to arrive to its destination. And the final stage, from all these alternatives that have been proposed, tries to sort them according not only to the average traveling time or the percentile of traveling time, but also to other policy coming from the municipality, so like discourage passing from the city center, or avoid planned roadwork, or event locations or whatever. So to be able to find routes that might be actually faster, or even if they are the fastest, they will not create too many problems in the city. And so finally, the best route is sent back to the car navigation system that will then lead the car from its starting point up to its destination. Okay, this system is composed of 3 parts, while the last 2 parts are easy from a performance evaluation point of view, because they can simply be modeled by an MCQ or by an MCQ, which is driven by some sort of fork and join process. Because all the routes in the one that computes the distribution in the second module can be studied by different servers, so that we can compute the traveling time distribution by different parts. Okay, what is instead really interesting is the first part that generates the actual topology, the routes that the car might follow. And this is where the approximate computing solution is applied. In particular, this component has several different ways in which it can behave. It's just one server, but it works in very different ways. So, first of all, it has 2 different types of working. One, when there is a normal traffic, a normal workload in a routing request, and another whenever we have a peak of requests. For example, it is the peak hour, or there is some event where everybody is trying to go. So, if we are in peak, there is some sort of fast algorithm. This is why this is called approximate computing. Of course, the fast algorithm is much faster than the other, but it is faster because it provides an approximate solution. It doesn't take into account all the possible things that one routing algorithm can take, and maybe it goes just by like Dijkstra or something very similar that goes with from the shortest path from the source to destination without doing anything further. Instead, the standard execution algorithm is something much more complex that accounts for several possible alternative paths, tries to solve them, and returns a set of paths to the second part of the algorithm that will then compute the time distribution. Of course, creating all these alternative paths is something that takes time. And so there is a second point that creates a timeout. So if at a given point in time there aren't a given threshold that has been passed, then the execution control will stop, and instead of continuing to giving other alternatives, we just stop with the alternative that has been provided up to that point. Okay, so if the system is fast, it will provide a 10 alternative. Otherwise, if it takes him too long and after 1 second only 6 out of 10 possible alternatives have been generated, the system will stop and the best solution will be chosen among 6 and not among 10. Okay, and again, this is some sort of approximate computing in the sense that we can tailor the quality of the result to meet some performance objective. Okay, so even if this is the model, I will mainly focus just on this part that is producing the alternative route because it's the one that couldn't be analyzed with conventional technique and for which we have tried to create a more sophisticated model. In particular, in order to be able to describe this in the best way, we use an hybrid model, high-level modeling language where we use some queuing network and queuing primitives like fork and join, infinite queuing station, and some other primitives took from the Petri nets, just to have the possibility of understanding condition and choose different routes. And in this case, basically, whenever we have some regular traffic condition, we have that some request arrives, they are being served. When they are served, they produce n possible alternative routes. Here we have one fork, meaning that the routes are produced in parallel. We use some special type of joining that this is not a natural join that will compose the job when all the part here and all the part are finished, but this is some join that as long it has as many, it takes just the first arrival either from the regular or the timeout, so that if too much time is taken, all the timeout will arrive first and we close the join and the other will be discovered. If there is some timeout, then the computation that goes from the bottom part will reach the join and will end this type of the job. And here, the overload is detected by the threshold of the queue. When there are n jobs, when the queue reaches a given threshold, then these jobs are served with the fast version of the algorithm that will provide the fastest solution. And it is very, okay, this has been solved using the Javelin modeling tool, which has been supported mainly by Professor Sarazzi of Polytechnic of Milan, which is now an emeritus, and he is, let's say, my boss over there, and Giuliano Casale from the Imperial College in Rome. And this new version of GNT supports both the possibility of including PetroNet primitives in queue network, and also this French type of fork and join, where some of the jobs in the join might be discarded to reach some given goal. Okay. The interesting thing of this approximate computing behavior is that we have a non-monotonical behavior in the performance. For example, this picture over here shows how the response time changes with the workload. We see that the response time tends to increase, but then it drops. And why it drops? Because while the system becomes overloaded, the fast solution gets used more and more and more often. So the quality decreases, the red line see how much the fast solution is being applied. The quality increases, but this increase in quality increases the speed, and so we have actually a reduction in the response time. Of course, at one point in which also the fast algorithm became too slow to be able to handle the system, and everything, of course, explodes. Okay? We have parameterized this model with data coming from the urban area in Milano. We have implemented a version of the software, and we have filled with some traces, and we have been able to parameterize and match and see that this particular model is actually able to handle the system with reasonably good results. Okay, so once we have this, we were able to model this application, and in particular, here the problem was to study how many cores should we give to the each part of the application. So how many cores give to the approximate computing part, how many to the one that computes the distribution, and how many to the one that provides the final solution. And well, with some search problem, starting from data coming from the actual workload, which changes during the day, so there are some hours in which we have more requests, some hours in which we have less. We have been able to find which is the minimum number of core required to have a utilization of less than 70%, I think, in all the search. And so we were able to determine for each of the 3 stages how many core would be required, which to support the application with the given performance goal in the different time zone, in the different time period of the day. Okay? And with this, if one provider which wants to apply this type of algorithm, instead of always buying the maximum number of cores, which is around 700, tries to open, shut down, and start up the virtual machine during the days, it can arrive to save almost 50% of the cost and of the energy. And of course, that was the reason of going in this capacity range. Okay, so basically that's it. The main focus was that this approximate computing scenario is something that is interesting from a modeling point of view, and here it was solved at a high level using a queuing network stochastic pattern. Actually, since we had the tool, this was, let's say, a motivating example for the tool, so we didn't invest too much time in trying to find an analytical solution, which I guess might be, I don't think we might find an exact identical analytical solution, but something might also be done from an analytical point of view. Here, if we have this type of tool, it was interesting to see that mixing languages like Petrinet and the queuing network is what allowed us to put in a classical queuing network program another language to describe a feature that the queuing network alone would have not been able to include, or in order to include it would have required us to modify the system. And this is interesting because here it was applied to this routing algorithm, but we have similar system, not exactly like this, but very close to this one, that came from the edge computing and fog computing that are basically the same behavior, and so might benefit from being able to describe the primitives with different languages. With this, I conclude my very quick introduction.
Yes. Yes, please. The first question.
It was clear part of this calculation of this creation of network was done with this tools Java.
Yes, Java.
And then the calculations on hundreds of cores was done also in Java.
No, okay, the Java modeling tool is just a general purpose query network simulator, which also has some Petrinet feature. and the model were run with this tool. So there was a search procedure which repeated the model several times with different parameters, searching for the best options.
So when you say that the ground was, let's say, 400 cost, that was embarrassingly parallel sort of
Yeah, exactly.
a replica within ground separately.
Exactly. The main idea was that each of these parts where we could define the number of executors in parallel for the portion of the algorithm, whatever. Because in any case, in this particular type, the reason for which a single HPC solution is interesting is because we want to have the routing inside the boot city. So if there is one, let's say, single point, knows how many cards has been sent on route A, so I will send on route B other cards because I know they are already sent on route A this many. Okay, this is the reason for having a single point of service. Nonetheless, each of the routes can be worked individually, and so of this workload, which in the Milano area is estimated to be around 2 million of requests per day, can be massively parallelized due to the fact that they are all identical.
I have a similar question about the analysis method. I have a similar approach, which I will present tomorrow, mixing HitVinet in task graphs, and I have an exact solution for that. What was approximate in this analysis? Where is the approximation?
No, okay. Actually, it wasn't approximated because it was a discrete event simulation. So
I will present an exact solution for this.
there could be, I mean, we have worked on exact solution, but not on these particular problems.
Okay. Yeah, excuse me, just to continue. When there are stochastic predictive networks, this is a certain language to describe it from. And then to have numerical results, you should translate it either to simulation, either to Markov chain. And in your case,
We use discrete event simulation.
discrete event simulation. Thank you.
So of course this is a very important problem, but the solution here looks only on one aspect. And then a colleague of mine, Tarek Abdul-Zahar from UAMC, worked on Chicago, and he gave two different criteria. One was the time, the other was linear, how green is the route. Because you know the traffic, so you know how efficient the car will be driving this way. And some drivers may choose green route and it's slightly longer if they have spare time. So it would be very nice extension to include these two solutions and give the choice to the driver.
Okay, as far as I know, the driver wasn't asked, please give me the greener solution, please give me the fastest solution. But in deciding this rock graph network, when presenting different alternatives to the different stage of the algorithm, was created to potentially support also this type of criteria. But as far as I know, it wasn't intended to give the possibility to the user to tune its preference, okay? But of course, this is something that could be very interesting, at least from the application point of view to be considered.
And especially important today, the city is kind of the model of the.
In my opinion, it should be also important if you do something like this to have some sort of multimodal transportation. So
Yes.
don't go there by the car. Go to the parking lot and get the metro.
Yes, it's also absolutely.
Thank you. There's no more questions. Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to thank you very much, the organizer, for inviting me here. difficult. It's related to, let's say, soft computing techniques. The talk Okay, I will present you a joint work with my younger colleagues, Piotr Duda, Maciej Jaworski, and Lena Pietruchuk. We worked together within perhaps 10 years. The girl Lena Pietruchuk left us after a few years, so later I continue with Piotr Duda and Maciej Jaworski. University, Częstochowa, between Warsaw and Krakow. The content of our lecture is here. Because of time, I will go rather fast and concentrate on some important issues. The lecture is based on our recent book. It is spring 2019. Actually, it is 2020. If you look at, Springer advertisement, it is 2020. Stream data mining, algorithms and their probabilistic properties, the title exactly the same as the title of this presentation. Of course, it's not possible to overview all material of this book during 30 minutes. The last time I looked at the schedule of this seminar, it was maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and I had at the time 1 hour. So I was not aware that so it will be, let's say, 25 minutes. So no problem for me. Just I concentrate on some most important issues of stream data mining. So it is related to big data, and all of you know what is big data and what are the characteristics as you see here. And stream data is a part of big data, ordered data, constantly generated, continuously generated by different sources. There are some special characteristics I will tell you in a moment about stream data characteristic. One perhaps the most important is concept drift. It means that the properties of stream may change over time, and because of that there are several difficulties in trying to develop algorithms for streaming data. Typical problems in data mining are the same for small data and big data. I mean traditional data and streaming data. So there are two problems: regression and classification. So all of us know what is regression problem, as you see here. In case of streaming data, that curve that is supposed to estimate, it's possible some changes. So we should track changes of that black indicated here curve. So it is much more difficult than in the case of traditional regression problems. Similar in the case of classification. This is a traditional two-dimensional classification problem. In case of streaming data, that black curve, may change during time. So we should construct algorithms tracking those changes, and it is it's a real challenge. It's not easy to. It's not possible to directly adapt. Modify. We have some tools for traditional data. It would not work if you try to make some changes, small changes of traditional data mining algorithms. It will not work. For some characteristic of stream data, which values of data multidimensional features, often fast changing. And this is the difference are emphasized here. Perhaps the one of most important is stream of data. One pass of data in case of stream data. And in case of static data, all data are available at any time. Of course, in the case of stream data, in the case of stream, it's possible that the distribution change with time. And another difference is in case of static data, it's unlimited processing time. In case of stream data, processing time depends on rate of incoming data. The pointer, it works or not? Pointer. So this is a terminology, maybe you are not familiar with the terminology, which is called concept drift. It's phenomenon describing the change in data distribution. In the literature, you see that the data, the random variables, they come from different probability densities, like you see. In literature, there are different concept drifts, and they are sudden, incremental, gradual, recurring, irregular, and so on. How to deal with concept drift? One is slightly window, so we should eliminate exams coming from an old concept. And the problem how to how many elements should fill in this window. How to find it in a sense, optimal sense. So maybe Professor Czachulski knows that a person who made a clever and original idea was the first director of your institute, Professor Stefan Węgrzy, in his book, I think in 50s or 60s. Today nobody is aware of it. That Professor Stefan Węgrzy presented perhaps the first in the world, theoretical solution. So how to design that window? How many elements should be taken in the window? To eliminate all data, and how many to take in the window, and that research was later on was continued by Professor Stanisław Kozielski, and it was his PhD. I remember I participated in seminar in 70s. Today, perhaps nobody knows about that. I remember very interesting result, theoretical result. In the literature, there are some attempts to design sliding windows. The most natural approach is based on weighted windows. So all these examples discarded by decay function. So it works in the, perhaps in the literature from automatic control maybe 50 years or 60 years ago that was such a problem was presented. Also in the context of the sequential recurrent least squares algorithm. There are some other concepts how to design the window. I will not present details because of time. Researchers in this area apply traditional, well-known statistical tools. So they take part of data and compare with another part of data. And they check if means of two populations, like you see here, are the same or not, or another approach, take estimate distribution and check the difference between one distribution of one part of data and distribution of another part of data. And in this case, they use Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, and very commonly used method, nothing sophisticated here. There are some references you see. How to process stream data. There are two methods. One is on-the-fly processing, instant incremental. So the model is updated after reading every single data element. This is one approach. And another approach is based on so-called chunks. You see how it works. It is self-explained here. So updating of the model must be completed before the next chunk of data is collected. Concerning design properties of system for dealing with data stream. So as you see here, most researchers agree that it should be incremental, read data only once. Very important is memory management, should work anytime and deal with concept drift, but not necessary. So this is a general scheme showing how to design stream data mining system, in this case for classification. So here we have drift detection. It may be one of those methods I explained you, like Kolmogorov-Smirnov or some other statistical tests. Classifier, any methods I will show in a moment. Decision trees, neural networks, many others. And we should constantly update our classifier, taking into account input data and drift detection. As I mentioned you, there are many methods, from neural network to ensemble methods, going to support vector machine, naive bias classifiers. In this area, perhaps hundreds or maybe thousands of papers, different approaches. One approach, and historically perhaps most influential in the literature, was based on decision trees. It's a short introduction. I will skip for decision trees because most people know how it works. So there are two aspects of decision trees design. The first is impurity measure, and the second is split measure. The mathematics is very simple. It requires knowledge from high school. I think maybe not elementary school. You should know the formula for entropy. So and this is the formula which is used in designing decision trees, and entropy is called impurity measure in the context of decision trees. And of course, we know when we have the lowest possible value of this impurity measure and when we have the highest. Another terminology in this area is split measure, which is a reduction of an impurity measure. Usually for students I explain this problem on very simple example. We have three attributes. A person married or not, age, uses computer at work. And so the three attributes are conditional attributes, and this is decision attribute. So we consider this as some nodes of seller in a computer shop, and the problem is to design decision tree. So we calculate using entropy split measure, and in this case, as you see here, the maximum value we got for the attribute a person uses computer at work or not. So we start our tree from the root, as you see here, and going down. So this is most popular technique. There are many variation, many improvements of the basic decision tree algorithms. Today I will not talk about that. In the example, I used information entropy as imperative measure. We also can use Gini index or classification error. And each of the impurity measure can lead to another decision tree. There's some illustration how it works, and there are some details how to design decision trees. That stuff was very easy, for not big data, not stream data. If we deal with big data, the problem is much more complicated. Typical examples are here, and on this slide you see hundreds of billions of data going from the top, going down. We have many sensors. In this case, we have, for example, 5 attributes, and we have one decision attribute. Of course, it is not possible to modify traditional decision tree algorithm for this purpose. However, several people try to do that, and the problem in this case, the biggest problem is not only which attribute to choose, because in our, let's say, toy example, we choose attribute with maximum split measure using very simple calculations. But the problem here is when to make a split. In this case, we have billions of going from top to down data, and we should choose only some part of data, trying to design our tree. And this creates a big challenge, big problem to be solved. And the first people who tried to do that are Domingos and Fulton in 2000 and 2001. They created the so-called Henning trees and very fast decision tree, and finally concept adaptive very fast tree. These papers here you see on this slide, they have perhaps few thousand citations in the literature, and most people, I think that almost all people engage in stream data mining cited the papers you see here. Domingos and Hulter, to solve the problem of, let's say, adopting traditional decision trees to big data, they took the tool which is called Henning inequality. That is from statistics. It says about probability of state deviation of mean, empirical mean and expectation of this mean. And this result is well known in mathematical statistics. And they took this theorem, and they presented very elegant, very nice result showing that calculate split measure for attribute calculate split measure for attribute with the highest value. Or let's say, let's take attribute with the highest value of split measure. And next, take attribute which gives the second, sorry. Here. And take the attribute a max 2, which gives the second max value of split measure. Calculate difference and check if it is greater than epsilon, and that epsilon depends on number of data and a certain delta. And how to find formula for epsilon. And Domingos and Houghton claim that using the Herding inequality, the formula of epsilon is given as you see here. It mainly what is the most important? It depends on the, let's say, number of data in a window we are now considering. So, and this result, as I mentioned, was cited a few thousand in the literature. I never understood that result. I was familiar from 70s at the time when I prepared my PhD. But I never understood, at least, from time to time I was looking at that, but I never had time to, to study, to go deeply how they achieved that result. But for me it was very strange. So I think that maybe nine or maybe 8 years ago, I got two postdocs, they mathematicians, and I told them that I don't understand how to get from Herding inequality that result copied, cited a few thousand times in the literature, because for me it is very strange. So those people, youngsters, they are sitting a few days and they told me they agree with me that it doesn't make sense, to use, So after that, I sent an email to my colleague, Warsaw Institute of Mathematics, Political Academy of Science, and a colleague was astonished, and he told me that it is nonsense. It doesn't make sense. So we decided with my postdocs to work on that. And in 2014, we published the first paper, explaining what was wrong in the paper, that original paper, Domingos and Houghton, and how to improve that method, how to improve. So we presented, a correct formula which describes how many data we should take in order, in some statistical sense, using algorithm dedicated to big data, the result in some probabilistic sense would be the same as for small data. This was the explanation of what we wanted to achieve. And there are some other papers, here is 2015, and we, on some other, there is we summarize here, our draft paper is 2018. So we summarized all the results obtained in this area in this table. We use different split measure, as you see here. We emphasize incorrectly obtained, and we presented several theorems showing the correct result. Again, I recall that the epsilon in each entry of this table, epsilon is a difference between split measure for attribute, or let's say it's an attribute maximizing split measure minus second attribute maximizing split measure. We take difference of these two quantities and check if this difference is greater than this value, especially number of data currently under observation. And this is very important because using the correct formulas, we can, with a certain probability, which is related to this delta, we can say that our result, in a probabilistic sense, dealing with big data, is equivalent to the result dealing with small data, roughly speaking. I will look at, perhaps I don't have more time.
Serious?
10 minutes? 10 minutes. We did a lot of work with our algorithms when we also constructed hybrid criterion. What is that hybrid criterion? We use different split measures like misclassification error and Gini index. They are different. And we, at certain stage of tree generation, we use, as you see here, misclassification error as a split measure, and later Gini index. And empirically, we show that such combination gives very good result. And this was published in IEEE Transactions on Neural Network 2018. There are some other results which I skip here. Another area of our research is possible use of ensemble methods. Concerning ensemble methods for stream data mining, there are a lot of very challenging questions, problems to be solved. For those of you, I'm sure that most of you are familiar with ensemble methods. It's like there are many classifiers, like a team of doctors. So we consult in a certain number of doctors, and we combine their diagnosis. And we should properly combine the diagnosis, and finally we have the decision. So this is the, if somebody is not familiar, that is the main idea of ensemble methods. So there are many problems concerning designing such structure. Which components to use, how big the ensemble should be, how to train the components. Each of these questions can be, a subject of PhD dissertation. Our original result was in this area. Please look at this block diagram. You see a certain number of classifiers, and we want to check. Does it make sense to add additional classifiers, and it will, improve the performance of the entire structure. So on the second, you see here we add one more. So if we add one more, then we have another accuracy. So we have this accuracy. Before we had this accuracy. And the question is, does it make sense to add new classifier, it will be better or not. And what we wanted to achieve, we wanted to analytically prove that adding a new member of a team possibly would improve performance of the entire structure. So our main result was published, I think that a year ago. I'm not sure, 2017 or 2018, I'm not sure. So just calculate probabilities, which is very, the formulas are elementary formulas for calculation of probabilities, and check if there's difference. So that is probability performance of that structure which contains one more block, one more component, and this is before adding that one more component, and we check if that difference is greater than this quantity, and this is the number of observations in our current window, and this is the quantile of the standard Hallmark distribution. So if it is satisfied, then that we can expect the improvements and it makes sense. It makes sense to add a new component. When to remove a component from the ensemble? In a similar way. In a similar way, we check probabilities, calculate differences. If it is satisfied, then the remover of the classifier will decrease of accuracy of the ensemble, and that theoretical investigations were supported by many experiments. And the last thing I will mention only maybe 2 minutes. Perhaps I don't have more time, so maybe 1 minute. Probabilistic neural networks for extreme data mining. I think that all of us are familiar, with histograms and probability density. So histograms for many years. So there's a popular tool, to visualize random data. However, in the 50s and later in the 60s, Emmanuel Parzen and Capoulos, they discovered another method for representation of probabilistic data. They proposed density estimators. Density estimators, it was proposed by Capoulos. We take several data. K is a Gaussian kernel, for instance, and based on using that formula, we get estimator of true unknown probability densities. And what we did, we worked on the problem when that unknown probability densities is changing with time. And this creates a big problem because, you see here, now the data from x1 to xn, they have different probability densities. So we have to track for changing probability densities. We propose this algorithm, and similarly, we propose the algorithm for time-varying regression functions using the same Parzen methods. However, the theoretical part was built by us from the start. I mean, it was not possible to use directly, Parzen proposition. There are some illustrations from our book. Summarizing, we overuse stream data mining algorithm, and we propose new speed measure. And the challenge is to find optimal value of constant C in this formula, because most differences between for speed measure for attribute which maximizes and the second which maximizes is in this spirit. We don't claim that our result is optimal on the best in the world. However, so far, people perhaps are still working on that, and it is very active area of research. Going to the end, there are several references you may find in our book. Each year we organize a conference on artificial intelligence and soft computing in Zakopane. Professor Alan Lambert visited us and had a plenary lecture a few years ago. The conference has not bad reputation. Please consider to come to Zakopane next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this entire lecture. Now, do we have questions for Professor? Not at the moment. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to this conference, and I feel really honored. And I would like to talk a little bit about feature selection and extend this notion to the multidimensional level. So for the last year, I've been working on implementation and accelerating of the multidimensional feature selection algorithm and developing its implementation on the distributed environments. All this to provide scientists with a new tool that will allow to analyze data that contains variables that are relevant only when considered in groups and are not relevant when considered alone. So a little bit about context. So in the 21st century, we've been introduced with the new and the fourth scientific discovery paradigm that is based on data. Growth of computing capabilities in connection with big data manipulation and the analysis give us new tools for broadening the knowledge and bringing new scientific breakthroughs. Let's take a brief view on the scientific landscape that reveals itself in front of us today. Here are some interesting scientific projects that are under development today and will be operational in the near future. In the left picture, we can see Large Hadron Collider that is located at CERN. Although it is operational since 2009, it is now undergoing a substantial upgrade to the high luminosity LHC that will increase its luminosity by a factor of 10 beyond the original LHC design value. It is expected to be operational since 2026 and is expected to generate 30 times more data than the LHC has already produced. The amount of data that LHC has already produced is close to an exabyte. Therefore, we will need close to 30 exabytes of storage in coming years only to support this project. In the middle picture, we can see Large Synoptic Survey Telescope that is located in north-central Chile and is expected to be operational since 2022. This astronomical project will conduct a 10-year survey of the sky and will deliver 500 petabytes, half an exabyte, of images and other data products that address questions about structure and evolution of the universe. And in the right picture, we can see Square Kilometer Array radio telescope, in short SCA, that is located in Australia and is expected to be operational since 2027. These thousands of radio receivers will create eventually a square kilometer of collecting area, and combined will create the world's largest radio telescope. And this project is expected to generate over half an exabyte of data per year. So it is clear that problems to be solved require approaches that are far beyond simply scaling current solutions. And it was nicely put in the roadmap for high-energy physics software and computing R&D for the 2020s that the nature of computing hardware is evolving with radically new paradigms. The quantity of data to be processed is increasing dramatically, its complexity is increasing, and more sophisticated analysis will be required to maximize physics yield. Having talked a little bit about physics, let's move to the original motivation of this work that lives inside us. The genomics is a field of great complexity where genes and proteins can interact with each other directly or indirectly. Some genes can be expressed strongly, while others can remain inactive. Additionally, human genome includes 100 trillion bacterial cells that affect our health, immunity, and comfort. But above all, genomics and omics in general is a field of great promises, such as precision medicine that will allow prediction of genetic diseases, will cure plenty type of cancer, or allow to produce drugs that are dedicated to the specific patient and his specific condition. So it is clear that the data is a good source for knowledge development and for broadening, for expanding the comprehension of the universe. And what we are experiencing today is a flood of data, and we need to find relevant information in it. And every data analysis begins with data introspection and evaluation. Finding information, the variables and features that are relevant for the phenomena under scrutiny is an inseparable part of every knowledge development. And additionally, reduction of problem dimensionality can lead to storage savings and allow faster data manipulation in next steps of the analysis. What's more, the data can contain variables that are only relevant when considered in groups and are not relevant when considered alone, which is complicating the case faster. And these facts are not negligible, but analysis of new phenomena where the domain-specific knowledge is limited or missing is hard, and feature selection and feature engineering is even harder. In such cases, it is highly likely that some additional irrelevant information will be stored or some relevant information will be disposed. There are many methods dedicated to feature selection, and they fall into three main categories. First, filters, where the identification of informative variables is performed before data modeling and analysis, and the examples are regularization and multidimensional feature selection, which is the subject of this presentation. Wrappers, where the identification of informative variables is achieved by analysis of the models, and the examples are random forest and support vector machines. And embedded methods, which evaluate utility of variables in the model and select the most useful variables. An example are deep neural networks and principal component analysis. So now we know that multidimensional feature selection belongs to the filters category, and it is this algorithm proposed by Nich and Rudnicki in a paper, All Relevant Feature Selection Using Multidimensional Features with Exhaustive Search. So what exactly is MDFS? And to understand it, we need to know basics of information theory, and this and these notions and definitions, such as information entropy, that is the measure of the information stored in the information system, information gain, that is the measure of how much the decision variable y is dependent on variable xi, and the multidimensional information gain, that is the extension of information gain to the multidimensional space, where by computing the difference between conditional information entropies of subsets with xi and without xi, we are able to measure the k-weak relevance of that information xi. And this difference of conditional information entropies is known as conditional mutual information and is expressed as IGK in this talk. So to perform multidimensional feature selection, we need to generate all k-element subsets of variables and then compute multidimensional information gain in the relation to the variable xi. Then we are able to find the maximum multidimensional information gain that reflects the biggest mutual information of that variable xi. And the simplest analysis is the one-dimensional one, and is expressed by this formula. So a little bit about complexity. So we need to generate all k-element subsets of variables. Therefore, the size of the problem is expressed by binomial coefficient of number of variables and number of dimensions. Therefore, the size of the problem grows rapidly with the number of variables and the number of dimensions, and can achieve impressive numbers quickly. And for example, if you were to perform analysis of 500 variables or 340,000 variables in 1 or 2 or 3 dimensions, we can achieve quite impressive numbers already. And these characteristics of multidimensional feature selection leads to the requirement for a vast computations that cannot be performed on the typical desktop or personal computer, and we need to turn for help to high-performance computing and benefit from these beautiful machines. Most of HPC clusters consist of hundreds or thousands of nodes that are connected via dedicated interconnect. Each computing node is equipped with a CPU, central processing unit, with local memory, and increasingly dedicated computing element called accelerator, like FPGA or GPU. So these beautiful machines require dedicated software, and development of this software needs special libraries. An example of such library is high-performance parallels. HPX is a C++ library that is an implementation of theoretical execution model parallels. And what does it do? So we have hundreds or thousands of computing nodes, and we have our problem that consists of hundreds or thousands of tasks and threads, and we need to map this problem efficiently on the machine to utilize the hardware efficiently and to achieve the solutions in a reasonable time. And HPX introduces several new approaches to the parallelism, but here are displayed 4 key ones, such as active global address space, constraint-based synchronization, lightweight threads, and data-directed execution. So, having that, we prepared two implementations of multidimensional feature selection algorithm. First one, that is optimal from computation perspective, but introduces more data dependencies and therefore requires more synchronization. And second implementation that introduces redundant computation, but the parallel is more straightforward and therefore we need less synchronization. So a little bit about first implementation. So we need to generate all k-element subsets of the variables, and for each of the subset we need to compute contingency table and then reduce contingency table in relation to the xi. And after that, we are able to compute information gain of that variable xi and store it in the vector of maximum IGs. This is the maximum IG. So a little bit about subset generation. So for example, we have 10 variables. We want to perform three-dimensional analysis. So let's pick up x5 as an example. So we begin from x5, x6, x7 and increment the variables accordingly till x5, x9, x10. And x5 remains constant. And what is interesting, if we, for example, pick up x2 as our starting point, we have this sequence. Again, we are starting from x2, x3, x4, and we are incrementing the variables accordingly. And what is the problem here is that these sequences can vary much, and therefore the load balancing of our work is not straightforward, and we came up with this distribution scheme that we call up and down distribution scheme. So again, we have 10 variables and we want to distribute work among 3 workers. And so we are first going up, so x1 is going to the first worker, second one is going to the second one, third one is going to the third one, and again fourth is going to the third one, and we are now going down, x5 is to the second and x5 is to the first, and this is the assignment we would achieve in this example. A little bit about second implementation. So in this case, we are generating k-1 element subsets, and we are somehow attaching the xi that we are interested in, and therefore we can compute the contingency table, the reduced contingency table, and in result the information gain of that variable xi, and again store it in a vector. So a little bit about generation scheme. So again, we have 10 variables. Let's pick up x5 as a starting point. So we are starting from x5, x1, x2, and we are incrementing the variables accordingly. x5 remains constant, and this is the sequence we would achieve. And as you can see, this sequence is much bigger than the one presented in the first implementation. But interesting point is that if we pick up x2 as our starting point, we achieve the same sizes of the sequences. Therefore, distribution of work is more straightforward. In this example, this is the assignment we would achieve. And if there was x11, for example, it would go to the third worker. A little bit about the results. So we did perform our tests on Cray XC40 Okeanos that is located at our facility. It has around 1,000 computing nodes, and each node is equipped with 2 CPUs, and each CPU is Intel Xeon with 12 cores, 2-way hyper-threading, and 2.6 GHz clock frequency. And the interconnect is Cray Aries network with Dragonfly topology. And we did perform our analysis on 2 datasets. First one, the Madelon, that has 2,000 objects and 500 variables. And second one, the Neuroblastoma, that has 340,000 variables. Please note that it has 3 orders of magnitude more variables than the first one, and it has 500 objects which are Persians in this case. And here are the results of the strong scaling results from 1 node up to 556 nodes. So as you can see, both implementations are scaling well, but the first one, here are 3 lines, but is performing better. It is scaling well, and it has lower time of the analysis because it is optimal from the computation perspective. And here you can see a starvation because there was not enough work for each node, therefore it didn't scale well in this example. A little bit about speed up. So we can achieve close to a linear speed up in relation to nodes, up to 556 nodes, and again, first implementation is performing better. We did perform weak scaling tests, and we call it a big data scenario. And as big data scenario, we understood the situation where the data cannot fit, whole data cannot fit on the single node. Therefore, it has to be processed in chunks, and it was processed that way in this example. And in this case, we're incrementing the size of the problem along with the number of nodes. And we are able to maintain a constant processing time of our analysis. And here about the performance growth. So as you can see, when we increment the number of nodes, we can achieve close to a linear performance growth. And here's neuroblastoma, results for the neuroblastoma, and again we are achieving good strong scaling results independently of the data set it is performed on. And as you can see, even though it has 3 orders of magnitude more variables, we are able to perform the analysis. And future work, so we're looking for further optimization possibilities of presented implementations, and this includes the current implementations and looking for other approaches. We want to expand our tool with new features, such as detection of subsets that implicates information gained for each variable, because this is important for the scientists to know, for example, exactly which genes interact with others. Maybe building dependency graph, and it would be something like a knowledge network that will show how variables are connected and which are strongly connected, which are less. And we are exploring GPU computations possibilities, and what I mean is we are looking for distributed GPU computations. In conclusion, so we did prepare 2 implementations from MDFS method. First implementation performs better and is able to scale up from 1 to 556 nodes, which is above 6,000 CPUs, CPU cores. And these are CPU-only computations. You don't require any other accelerators. And we did achieve reduction of analysis time from 6.5 hours below 3 minutes. So you can increase your performance from 1 analysis per day up to 20 analyses per hour. And we showed perfectly scaling results when we can maintain the constant processing time from 1 to 64 gigabytes. And I'd like to thank all people that helped me with this work. They showed me good heart and patience, and especially Maciej Markwiany, Radosław Filiszek, Marek Michalewicz, that is present in the audience, and Witold Trudnicki. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, please.
I'm curious because the heuristic you use is very simple, like the heuristic I showed before, based on entropy method.
Yes.
So I'm curious whether you have available commercial available packages for solving similar problems, and did you make some comparisons?
My work was dedicated to accelerating this algorithm, and Witold Trudnicki is the author, and he done all the testing and so on. And I'm not a statistician, I'm a mathematician, so I don't know about any comparable results with this method.
Okay, I understand that you achieve a goal by speeding up.
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe I will comment on that. I think it will be very easy. Because basically, you replace the camera instead of calculating this entropy conversion and summing them up. You substitute the computational parameter to whichever entropy you use. And the speed up should be similar. So that's the acceleration of this. The Krakow of the series parallels of parallel computation. So it's a scope for further work.
Thank you. As we should finish in 18 sharp, I close the discussion and the last final presentation for the software and others from Network Science and Technology Center. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to talk today about how we can automate gathering the data about processes which are quite often described by the plain language, which is not always easy. And then also, this gives us very interesting viewpoint on do we need experts or is the AI absolutely enough? And then some of these shed some light on this problem. The work was done in the Center of Network Science and Technology at RPI, and Dr. Xiang Niu just joined the Google research team, and Professor George Cornish is my colleague from physics. And generally the work is only presented, there's much larger group involved. So what is the problem? We got intrigued participating in World Economic Forums in the yearly global risk report, which is a titanic work. They engage about 1,000 experts all over the world, which they provide the assessment of about 30 to 50 risks which they deem to be the most important in a given year. And they estimate for each risk on one axis, this is the y-axis, impact, and on the other axis, likelihood. It is measure of intuitive measure, not probability. Likelihood of this event happening. And they group them into very broad groups. So economic, they are now economic risks, which are blue or dark blue, and as you see, they are spread over. For example, we have, this color change. Here we have some unemployment, which is like pretty high, both in terms of the impact and in terms of probability. And then, we have also smaller one, like failure of critical infrastructure, which would be much smaller. And then we can go and environmental, which are green. And it happens to be that in 2016, these issues started to become very important, because if you look at these extreme weather events are very highly likely and also very impactful, and that is a result of the climate change. then not only there is the warming, but the extremes of the weather becomes larger, it's less stable. And of course we have also some events which would be much lower rank. And if we go further, we have also geopolitical, and geopolitical are important because, for example, you see that we have this very likely event coming, which is large-scale migration, and also we have some smaller in this area, like, for example, it could be global governance, failure of global governance, which what it means that, for example, the Security Committee of the United Nations have the votes which allow some big powers to block punishment for the breakers of the agreement between countries. And then the other thing is societal, and in this societal again you can see a spread of these different risks. What is very interesting, if you look at these risks, some of them are very, very mathematically oriented. We have, for example, good sense when environmental, like hurricanes, monsoons come, we can have a good sense of distribution and so forth and so forth. The others are extremely descriptive. Societal, how we measure. At what point migration becomes a big threat and at what point it does not. At what point migration is disruptive and at what point is helpful. So clearly we need new tools in order to describe dynamics of this system, and that was our goal. Technologically are quite measurable, better than societal and geopolitical. Economic are also measurable because they are easily expressed in money. So one of the most important things that we need to discover in order to do any models, we need to discover how dynamics looked in the past. Because we can set some parameters, very typical approach, for this model, and then match this model with the past data in order to do prediction. So that's the way we proceed here. So therefore, the very important idea is that experts don't provide very strong backing why they choose these values they choose. And therefore, they choose it, of course, knowing in a general, assessing on their knowledge and contacts what it is. But we would like to back it up with the publications and media. We want to learn from the web media which risks were active and when, because it's instrumental to the model to map it. But then there is also a very subtle thing. Media are not the same as expert assessment. What is the difference? And then that would tell us whether using just the data without experts would be as precise. And finally, we are interested in regional effects of risk, because for free, when we process this data, we can get places in which these risks activate. Going then, what model we use? Model is well known, it's machinery theory. We have this model in which machine is working okay, in state normal, and then of course failure causes that machine does not produce anything. If we apply to risk, it's very similar, except that we also introduce some maybe additional states. In this case, that would be state of recovery. But basically, then, what is important, unlike machine, that in this risk we have three different dynamics, and it could be very nicely expressed in an equation describing the dynamic of the whole system. There's an internal process. Each of these risks can fail on its own based under the weight of the event. On the other hand, there is the connected pots. In other words, if we have a situation that one risk overwhelms the forces of the civilization, industry, government, then that may impact ability to withstand the pressure from others. So therefore, we have also external process. In this external process, we have cause that one risk being active activates the other. And then the recovery process is telling us how likely is this risk to continue to be active. And please note, L in these equations means likelihood assessed by the experts. And then we allow that the experts may distort the probabilities. So therefore, we have these very important parameters, alpha, beta, and gamma, which we would like to find from the past performance, which would tell us how precise experts were in assessing the risks. And then that leads to this maximum likelihood evaluation problem, when we have a Markovian process in which each of these risks in each time tick was chosen as 1 month, which sort of experimentally was the best. Week was too small and quarter was too long. And then we would then get the equation which would tell us that in 1 month all the states of all risks may change according to these equations, which tell us if the state of this risk was whatever it is, then the change may come through these 3 processes which are assumed to be Poisson. So therefore, we can take the log of this and then try to match the data with these probabilities and see what is the discrepancy and find out the most likely values of alpha, beta, gamma, which give us the values. But for that, we need the data. We need the data when each risk was active in the past in order to do this. So we turn to Wikipedia current event portal, WCEP, which describes events in this way that we can extract them to our risk. Because experts, when they describe each risk, they use the keywords which describe what kind of events would belong to this risk. And therefore, using these keywords and iteratively in supervised learning, drawing more keywords from the data, we can get the process going. So, for example, in this Wikipedia data, we have stories. Like, for example, 2004 Atlantic hurricane season. And for each story, we have set of events associated with this story. For example, event 4571 reports that at least 9 deaths were in Florida, 2 deaths in Bahamas, and 1 death in Georgia, which were blamed on the storm. Damage estimates range widely from 2 billion to 15 billion, reported on the September 7, 2004. So when we see that this event, in fact, refers to storm, death by weather, and economic loss by weather. And those are all the keywords which are associated with certain risks. And they also identify places, Florida, Bahama, Georgia, and the date. So, how we process it? So build a system in which we have these initial keywords given by experts, and for each risk according to the description, we find these initiated keywords, and then we have this extreme weather event, and we have this initial list of keywords, and then, like for example, storm, and then keyword storm. So therefore, we would then go through all the list of stories, and then we would see whether the story contains the tags, and then we would then compare it to the list of keywords, and if we see that repeatedly several words repeat in these stories associated with this, we will see whether they are reasonable keywords for this event. So we merge keywords lists, and like for example storm, for example here storm didn't happen, so we do not have new keywords would be storm again, but of course we could have death by storm, and therefore would be added. And then what we have is step 3, we take event a keyword and filter by event by keywords, and see whether or not we have the tag corresponding to this. So that enables us to get each event positive or negative instance in respect to the given risk. Example, if we have class storms, positive instances would have to contain the word storm. Tropical storm, gas storm, and so forth. This event has positive relation. Negative instances, Australia Qantas Airways had some problems. Nothing to do with storms. So therefore, we can classify according to this all these events automatically. And then in the step 4, we create bag-of-words representation, and using random forest classification, we select the relevant words. So trains, classifiers using bag-of-word representation of event description. That's the step number 4. For example, once we have positive instances, storm, we see that it's tropical, storm, rain, flooding, and so forth, and we check how often they repeat, and then either add them or not to the new one. Negative instances, airways, plane, drop, worldwide, and so forth, would be also added. And in step 5, now we have the final stages, random forest classification. We entropy rank of the feature keywords and then select keywords by human decision. This is why it's supervised. So, ranks features keyword of the training classified by the entropy, and then we have storm. We see that the highest was storm, next was rain, third was flooding, and so forth. That, as the result, we could add, for example, top 2 words which are not yet in the keyword list, rain and flooding, to this addition. So therefore, the whole diagram is shown over here, and I went through step. It looks complicated, but in fact, it's a very straightforward implementation of this building iteratively, back of words, a representation of this, starting as an initiation what we got from our experts. And then using that, we will be able reliably to get events corresponding to each risk. What is very important in the large databases like this, in Wikipedia, 90% of events are not related to global risk. So therefore, we only focus on 10% of these events, and that we avoid processing all the events. So 90% of the work is safe for humans, only 10% will be left for processing and checking. Here is an example how we build from that risk network. We have this story about Atlantic hurricane season, and then we had event 4571, which is related to risk of extreme weather event, 10, and failure of climate change. They are connected. So therefore now we see that they are called triggered. And then in the next event, we may have another risk, large-scale involuntary migration, which should not be connected because it's not related to them at this point. But later we can find connections that they are connected because quite often the weather impacts that people feel that they cannot live in their countries and try to escape the bad weather and bad crops. So as the result, we now here have a comparison of 2 networks. One was built by experts. It's on the top, World Economic Forum. The other was built by going to media and seeing what media tell about the same events. And they are very close, as you see. Look at the colors and so forth. Where size of the nodes show how intensive they were in terms of likelihood in experts network, which is the higher one, and in media. Also look that connectivity is similar but not exactly the same. For example, we have only 170 edges in the World Economic Forum, but 201 edges in the media network, and only 108 common edges. So what we found out from these experiments, that humans look at things which are very visible to them, very strongly affected their life. For example, asset bubble. Of course, it creates inflation, problems with the banking, slowing the economy. Extreme weather event. Of course, there are floods, suffering, and so forth. And then private data leak. Yes, it affects our life. On the other hand, so there are the risks that directly impact everyday life. On the other hand, biodiversity loss. That's much more difficult for common people to worry about it immediately. They still see animals, they still see nature around. But scientists are alerted, experts are alerted, because we see all these small, not visible every day, genes, species dying, and that's a very dangerous thing. And the other thing, risks with future potential impact on humanity are much more stressed in the expert system. So that means that we need experts, because they provide this bigger knowledge which goes beyond just the shared data in the media. So, for example, we once again need to see that we now can also get location of these events. So not only dates, and that really provides us with the interesting view of on the map, because all of a sudden we see concentrations. For example, Atlantic hurricane season, extreme weather event happened in Virginia, United States. Then one event comes. Then we have also the story about Florida and Georgia, again United States, 2 events. Then we see Cuba being impacted by the large-scale voluntary migration. Cuba would get societal risk, 1 event count. And then if you look, for example, that way counting, and then normalizing by taking the count plus 1 and divided by max count plus 1, we get where is the highest level of events. For example, economy, it was Russia and US, which were 1 is 0.95. Next was Japan, 75, Mexico, 72, and Greece, 61. So the most developed countries and the countries on the verge, which sort of then are most affected. If we look at the map of environmental, you would notice that mostly the countries with large coasts, because coasts are the really frontier of the weather. Storm can come from oceans and seas and affect humans' life. On the other hand, if, for example, US was 5.0, Mexico 0.9, China 0.97, Japan 0.91, India 0.91. Geopolitical, as you see, it's North Korea and Syria and a lot of countries around Middle East. Again, those are the countries in which there is staging war or unstable political situation, and therefore, not surprisingly, they are most affected. And then heat map of societal is very similar to the previous one, because all these geopolitical troubles translate into pressure on society, and which leads to oppression and so forth. Finally, technological, it's very interesting. US, we see US, UK, China. Therefore, they are countries which are the most developed or most moving forward when this pressure is being created. So that was very useful. We for free got this kind of additional views how these risks are concentrated on the map of the world. So we saw that as an advantage. So contribution of our work. We did an automatic detection tool for risk event collection. We reconstructed relational dependencies from risk events in the Wikipedia crowdsourced events. And then we show that experts are concerned about long-term risks which may not even actually create activations. But if they come, they would be very dangerous. So therefore we look more into the future, whereas the public and media tend to concentrate on actual risks which are making our life difficult. We've also found that spatial characteristics arise when we gather the information and just map them. So this visualization of data showing additional information where they are located clearly show on the map of the world certain concentration points, things in which things are tense. And then economic risks are in trade, developed countries, and also providers of resources. Environmental risks are in coastal areas, geopolitical risks are in stable nations, social risks are consequence of geopolitical risk, and technological risks are in technological advanced countries. So that was their contribution, and I'll be happy to answer the question, not to stand between you and their dreams.
Yes, please.
I have a kind of a humorous side comment, which is the following. I've lived in North Carolina and in Florida, both areas, immediately hit by hurricanes and so on. Now, a hurricane is bad news for the insurance company.
Yes.
But it's not bad news for the state as a whole, because it pushes up the GDP of the state, simply because the construction companies have a lot of work. So the construction industry loves hurricanes.
Yes.
And furthermore, the school children like it, because the schools are closed. Schools are used as places where people can go and stay when there is something like that. And the kids just love it, because they don't get any have to go to school. So there are positives and negatives,
Yes.
depending on how you look at the data.
Yes, I just wanted to mention this comment. It's a very good comment. And also, please note that it also shows a hidden connection. Because, for example, in US, insurance, especially in these areas on the coast, are subsidized strongly by the government. And therefore, rich people build these wonderful houses, you know, they are washed every 5 or 10 years, and they have new house because insurance pays for them. And the insurance doesn't represent the cost to society. So therefore, those are very interesting dilemma. What we do about that? We should change the policy, especially when the weather change. Now, 100-year floods happen every 10 years. 100-year hurricanes now come every 10 years. That changes the outcome for the insurance company. And on the other hand, I can also say a very similar story. Somebody claimed, few economists, that Titanic created a boom for American industry. So many old, stubborn, you know, captains of the American companies died in Titanic, and their sons took over, and they were open to no innovation. So, and then if you look, it's a bump. It's a bump jumping after 1911, the Titanic sank, in terms of the productivity and innovation in US. So you never know. The same story, Renaissance. The Renaissance was caused by disaster, the epidemics in Europe. All of a sudden, there was not enough people.
It was the fault of the Turks.
Yes.
It was like Europe.
Yes.
As a result, a lot of people fled.
Right?
All scholars fled to Europe and Rome.
Yes, that's true. So you see, disasters sometimes are beneficial long term, but it's very difficult to explain to the people who suffer.
It's always the fault of the Turks.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I have presented two sort of worldviews. One was by experts,
Yes.
and the other was based on newspaper.
Yes.
It might be biased, because as we all know, Americans are extremely US-centric. They don't perceive the world as others perceive it.
Yes.
And if you drew this other source of data, let's say based on Chinese or Russian, some really influential, big
World Economic Forum, which gathers every year in Davos in Switzerland, is run by Schwab, who is like very influential professor in the European Union, and it's very European Union centric, if at all. And Chinese are big presence, and so I think it is very close to being very, very even. And these 1,000 experts are really all over the country, including some countries in Africa. Women, they really were very careful selecting sources, from young researchers, brilliant researchers, to old captains of the industry who know everything, to politicians who maneuver. So I think it's a very, I wanted to tell you, error in the predictions of probabilities was 4%. Amazing. When we published the results, all the psychologists, how we did it. Participation, unless you are invited, costs $50,000. And every expert who does the expertise has the right to come. Not everybody comes. Only 2,500 people from all the world come. Mixture of talents, mixture of scientists, artists, everything. And of course, a lot of politics.
you. But I think it's the time to thank you again.
Thank you.